Once upon a time, in the dark and dangerous back alleys of the city, lived a sly and cunning fox named Ricky. Ricky was known for his quick wit and even quicker paws, always ready with a clever scheme or a charming lie to get what he wanted. But behind closed doors, Ricky had a secret, a hidden darkness that lurked beneath his charming exterior. He was a cheat. Every night when the moon hung like a silver coin in the inky sky, Ricky would sneak out of his cozy den and prowl the streets in search of adventure. He'd frequent the seedy bars and smoky gambling halls, where he'd lose himself in games of chance in the company of shady characters. And it was not just the thrill of the gamble or the camaraderie of the cards that kept him coming back. It was the opportunity to stray from the loving embrace of his vixen wife, Vanya, a creature of pure light who waited patiently for him at home. For his part, Ricky had convinced himself that his nightly escapades were just a harmless bit of fun, a way to blow off some steam and enjoy the finer things in life. He told himself that Vanya would understand, that she was too good for him, that he wasn't worthy of her unwavering love and devotion. But deep down, even as he reveled in his deceitful ways, a tiny voice whispered in the back of his mind, warning him that his luck wouldn't hold forever. And as it turns out, that voice was right. One fateful evening, as Ricky was swaggering home from one of his all-night binges, he heard a noise that made his blood run cold, the sound of shattering glass and a woman's anguished cry. His heart skipped a beat and he froze in his tracks. That was the sound of his own home. With a surge of adrenaline, he raced toward the commotion, his mind filled with 1,000 dreadful scenarios. As he rounded the corner, his worst fears were confirmed. There in the flickering lamplight, he saw the shattered remnants of his window, the torn fabric of his curtains. And on the floor lay a broken vase and a pair of muddy footprints. And then he saw her, his beautiful Vanya, curled up in a corner, her eyes wide with terror, her fur ruffled and matted, her usually vibrant spirit dimmed with fear. Before he could utter a word, before he could even begin to imagine what had happened, Vanya sprang to her feet and lashed out at him, her eyes blazing with anger and betrayal. Words tumbled out of her mouth in a torrent, each one a fresh wound on his already battered soul. She accused him of every secret sin, every hidden lie, every moment of infidelity he'd ever committed. And as she spoke, his carefully constructed world came crashing down around him, leaving him shattered and exposed. Vanya, it turned out, had finally had enough. She confronted him about his nightly absences, his drunken romps, his careless betrayals. And when he couldn't bring himself to tell the truth, to confess the full extent of his deceit, she knew she had to end their relationship. With a heavy heart, she banished him from their home, leaving him to wander the cold. Dark streets with nothing but the tattered remnants of his dignity and a growing sense of dread. Ricky, once the slick, charming rogue, was now a hunted animal, his past sins catching up to him in the most painful way imaginable. Alone and afraid, he sought refuge in the dingy underbelly of the city, sleeping in the grimy corners and begging for scraps of food. The friends he'd made in his more prosperous days turned their backs on him, leaving him to face his demons alone. As weeks turned into months, Ricky's despair grew. He became a gaunt, shadowy figure, his once bright eyes dulled with defeat. And as he stumbled through the city, a living testament to his own folly. The memory of Vanya's heartbroken gaze burned into his soul like a brand. He realized too late the depth of his loss, the immeasurable value of his wife's love, the warmth of her embrace, the light of her spirit, all of which he'd thrown away for a life of fleeting pleasure and hollow companionship. One rainy evening, as Ricky was seeking shelter from the downpour, he came across an old, dilapidated bar. The flickering neon sign above the door cast long, distorted shadows on the pavement, and the sounds of laughter and music spilled out into the rain-soaked street. Desperate for a moment's respite from the downpour and the torment within, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior of the bar was dim oil lamp, lighting the worn wooden tables and chairs, the air thick with the smell of stale waste and regret. The few customers inside huddled in their seats, nursing their drinks, their faces etched with weariness and defeat. Ricky, drenched and disheveled, stood out like a sore thumb. And as he scanned the room for a dry corner, his eyes met those of a wizened old cat who sat alone at a table in the corner. The cat, whose name was Midnight, regarded Ricky with an air of world weariness. as if he'd seen enough of life's folly to last several lifetimes. Despite his initial reluctance, Ricky found himself drawn to the cat's quiet intensity. Perhaps it was the kindred spirit he sensed in the animal's eyes. Or maybe it was just the lure of a warm fire and a listening ear. Whatever the reason, he sat down opposite Midnight and began to speak. He told the cat about his lost love, about the pain and loneliness that had become his constant companions, about the gnawing guilt that echoed the accusations of his betrayed wife. Midnight listened patiently, his amber eyes gleaming with understanding, his whiskers twitching with empathy. When Ricky fell silent, overwhelmed by the weight of his own despair, Midnight spoke in a voice raspy with age and wisdom. He spoke of the fleeting nature of pleasure, the importance of loyalty, the enduring power of love. His words were like balm on Ricky's raw soul, soothing the wounds that had been festering for so long. Midnight told him that while there was no undoing the past, there was still hope for the future, that he could find redemption through acts of kindness and the pursuit of honesty. But Ricky, despite the cat's wise counsel, couldn't shake the feeling that his life had become a hopeless tangle of deceit and ruin. As the night wore on, his despair grew, and he began to lash out, not only at his own demons, but at the world around him, seeing nothing but reflections of his own fractured being. Midnight, sensing Ricky's turmoil, rose from his seat and approached the fox, his movements slow but purposeful. He looked into Ricky's eyes, and in that moment, something shifted within the fox's soul. He saw in the cat's gaze not judgment, but compassion. He saw not condemnation, but understanding, and he saw not pity, but hope. With a sudden surge of determination, Ricky got to his feet, his eyes shining with newfound resolve. He thanked Midnight for his wisdom, for showing him that even in the darkest depths of despair, there was still a flicker of light, a glimmer of possibility for change. As the first rays of sunlight began to peek through the grimy windows, Ricky left the bar, his steps lighter, his heart a little less heavy. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he was ready to face whatever challenges came his way, knowing that he had the strength and the wisdom to overcome them. And so, Ricky's journey began anew, not as the cunning, deceitful rogue he once was, but as a creature transformed by sorrow and the promise of redemption. The road ahead was long and arduous, but he was no longer afraid, for he had learned a truth more profound than any he had known before: the cost of infidelity and the enduring power of loyalty. Well, folks, that's our story today. A tale of deceit, despair, and ultimately the dawning of a new day. Remember the cunning fox, Ricky, and the wise old cat, Midnight? They remind us that even in the darkest of nights, the dawn will eventually break. So be wary of the temptations that lead to ruin, cherish the bonds of loyalty, and always seek wisdom in the quietest of corners. For who knows where your redemption might lie? Until next time, stay sharp, stay true, and keep your hearts open to the lessons that life whispers in the still of the night. Sweet dreams.